Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm with Paige Payne of Online Landscape Designs, and we are going to talk about how permaculture and health are intertwined, or let's just say landscape or parks or our backyard or any type of like flowers, plants, trees, the birds and the bees, everything kind of goes together and impacts our health. And I want to we're going to talk about what is permaculture so we can get an idea. We're both on the same page about it. I want to talk about the microbiome from the soil perspective, but also the human perspective, because again, intertwined. Landscapes and cultures and how those bring us together. And then obviously the connection between mental health and our outdoor exposures. And we kind of chatted a little bit about COVID before we got started. So let's jump in. Paige, can you tell us what exactly permaculture is?
Permaculture is, it's a combination of the words permanent and agriculture. So it's traditionally a form of land management. People use it to build farms, ways to grow food. And what permaculture looks to do is it looks to work with the earth, so working with nature rather than against it, to create systems that are regenerative, zero waste, wanting to connect people with the earth and also components of farms and systems with each other. So waste from one system might become a benefit to the next system. It's all about connections. Mm-hmm. It's all about working with nature to create human systems that make sense. And it's a design philosophy. So whenever you can, like I said, traditionally it's used to manage land, but it can be used to design social systems, businesses, all these kinds of things.
Yeah,
So,
it sounds very holistic, and I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but when we have those connections to like, oh, you have chickens and you use them because you want eggs, but now you also have manure that you can then compost and have a nitrogen source for regenerating the land, and you can then have eggshells. Like I just made water-soluble calcium this morning because we did a big batch of making eggs for something, and so we have all these calcium shells and throw them in some vinegar, and then boom, now you have an amendment to add to your soil to get access instead of just throwing things away. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So it's and you want to work with what you have too. So we live in a dry desert climate. So just really paying attention to what kind of soil do we have? We have dry climate. We have clay soil. So what are the things that that grow well in that naturally existing environment, and work with that instead of trying to create, an East Coast garden or, a lawn or that kind of thing. What can we use that's already here? What are the benefits of our existing system to, and take advantage of those resources?
You mean I shouldn't consider planting rhododendrons and water-loving roses and Kentucky bluegrass in my yard? In Colorado, that doesn't really make sense. Not that we don't love those things, but we can go places to get those, and bringing in our native species, which is something I really care about because we've seen a huge decline in native songbirds because so many of us are just like, oh, I want, my grass and I want this and I want the maple trees that are in my backyard that don't grow naturally in Colorado.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, there's so much beauty. A lot of people, if you're lucky enough to be born in Colorado, that's great. But if you weren't, most people move here because they love the natural beauty. They want to go out and be in those mountains. They want to see what's naturally here and experience these beautiful landscapes that we have. But when it comes to their own personal yards, they want to. Why are you creating something that's opposite? Yeah. When we can create something that works for us. That works with our climate. Now that being said, we want to grow food. Some people want to grow food, some people don't. But so there are ways that we can reuse the resources, like what you're talking about, your eggshells, and using resources to create environments where we can grow some of the things that maybe don't naturally occur here, but that benefit us. Because in permaculture, we want to create spaces that are beneficial to the earth, but we also want to create spaces that are beneficial for humans because we're here and We want to work with the earth. I mean, people have been living on the earth and with the earth for however long humans have been in existence.
Yep, there's some arguments about that now at this point. But.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have the opportunity to benefit the system as well. The way that we kind of live and can tend to think sometimes is that nature is outside of us, and we need to control it, or we don't want to be in it, or we need to change it. But we can really benefit. We can benefit other species, we can benefit ourselves, and we can benefit the earth, and all of those things can work together to create a holistic, as you said, space that works for everyone. Good for the earth, good for people, good for all the species on the earth. Yeah.
You've seen that graphic that has the earth and then like all the different types of animals, including humans, around the earth, equally distributed, as opposed to the hierarchy that I kind of grew up learning in school, where humans are at the top of the pyramid and everything below is kind of less than. And I feel like that's what's gotten us into some of the crises that we're currently in, with topsoil erosion, with mental health issues, with drug addiction issues, with, the soil is continuing to be tilled every time I drive through Delta. It's like, oh, they just took all the corn stalks out. Now they're going to till it and leave it naked for the winter, for all the water that we do get, all the snow that we do get to just run off. There's nothing to actually like hold and root it down and maintain that moisture.
Yep. And killing all the little microbes and the decomposers and and it's all a web. It starts from the very, very bottom of, you expose the bacteria in the soil, the bacteria die, the decomposers are chopped up into little bits. And then the plants can't grow, and then, you don't have your pollinating species, and you don't have your birds and all those things. So, it's all a web. And we have the unique opportunity of being able to actually recreate those systems. If habitats are being destroyed to build our homes and things like that, we need homes.
We do.
But we can do our part to put something else, back that recreates that habitat for other species. And we don't have to, it doesn't have to be so hard. We don't have to till every single time. We don't have to put down chemical fertilizers. We don't have to scrape away topsoil or haul in topsoil. There are ways that we can create these systems that all work together to, like we said, one waste from one, your food scraps can go into compost, go into soil, can feed the apple tree. Your apples can feed the chickens. Your chickens might be next to a greenhouse that helps the greenhouse and the chickens warm each other. You got the eggs, you've got the seeds, the chicken manure is put into the garden beds where you can plant the cucumbers, all those things. So
it's really about reduction of waste, which every time we take out the recycling, I'm like, God, is there because we're working on a garden bed project in the backyard right now, can we use the cardboard as a carbon agent and also a weed preventer, which I was shocked the first time this got introduced. My husband introduced it, and we did 2 beds. One where I did the typical, we're going to till it because that's what I learned, and then we put his down and did some lasagna with the cardboard. And I was shocked at how much easier it was. So easier, meaning less time, meaning lazy.
Yes.
Lazy work.
Exactly.
And that is always the thing that catches me off guard when I've learned about these more regenerative agricultural practices, is they're so much easier and way less time intensive. It's a different way of thinking, but it's really less difficult, significantly less difficult.
You're not turning things over and over and over and hauling in and taking away. You're saving yourself time, you're saving yourself money, you're saving yourself. One of the in permaculture, a hammock is kind of a symbol in permaculture, and the idea is that you put in the work up front, you do what you're doing, and then you want to be able to lay in that hammock and enjoy the paradise that you've created, where you're growing your own food, and it's less stress. I mean, if you can just let go of I need to have this beautiful lawn that doesn't have a single weed in it, and I've got to bring in fertilizers and I've got to bring in chemicals, and you can actually just maybe let your grass grow. This year, what I did in my yard, I just moved in last year, so this year there's a huge lawn. And I kind of just let it grow. I have ditch water, so I didn't water it very much either. The less you mow it, it kind of started to naturalize, and all of a sudden I had flax seeds in my yard.
Cool.
I had penstemon growing up in my yard, blanket flower, because I wasn't chopping it every single year. So these plants that were there already, seen as a weed if I had put weed and feed on it and destroyed all the wildflowers. So it became a more natural system, and it became enjoyable for me. Well, I wasn't looking out my window and going, I gotta go mow that lawn. I was like, oh, look, there's a flax growing. And now there's a butterfly on the flax, and now there's bees, and now there's penstemon over here. And it just, it kind of really helps to just enjoy the space more and enjoy what is instead of trying to make it into something that it isn't. I mean, we do want to design our spaces and be intentional with what we do, but we also want to take our cues from nature and let it be easy and let ourselves reap the benefits of nature and work with it and appreciate what it has to offer without trying to change it and control it.
Yeah, I'm hearing diversity. Before, it just looked like grass, your typical lawn that everybody has outside, and we've gotten flack from our neighbors because we didn't put a lawn in. We didn't let it regrow. But when we've had these big conversations as a society about like we want to have diversity and make sure we're including other people, but what about diversity of plants? Because when we talked about transplants and moving around, and most people that I know that live in Colorado aren't from Colorado, which of course, like, it's a great place. I don't want to not live here. Like, but that's a diversity thing. So then we miss our plants, we miss our trees that we have from back wherever we're from. So we want to see those things because they're a reminder they're just like a little wholesome. But what about the natural beauty that's here? Pentstemon a natural flower that grows in Colorado. It's actually truly from here. It hasn't been naturalized. And so it just, nature wants to be diverse in and of itself. Our microbiome is much healthier. Our gut microbiome is much healthier when we have more types of bugs living inside of our body than when we do nukes of antibiotics, which there's a time and a place. Like, hey, my brother-in-law just got sepsis. He needed to have an antibiotic. I'm glad we have antibiotics for cases like that. But for every time, I did an episode a couple months ago on the overuse of antibiotics. And this kind of like putting pesticides and herbicides in our garden, on our food, on our lawns, and just hoping, like, hey, like, we just want grass. I don't want the crabgrass. I like walking through grass. I don't like stepping on pokies. Fine. I won't walk through that grass then. But I also am then walking through grass that has pesticides on it, or herbicides. And our skin absorbs that. Like, we are being negatively impacted by the chemicals we're using in agriculture, and also to maintain our like community or landscapes around our homes.
Exactly. Yep. And
we're fighting against nature.
Yes, exactly. And there are studies that show that gardeners have a more diverse microbiome, and more diversity in plants actually equals different diversity in plants creates a different microbiome, and it creates it for the people who are gardeners. So gardeners have more diverse, but also members of their households too. So one person being a gardener can benefit a whole family. So
yeah, we
thanks,
share.
Mom and Dad.
We share. Well, it's true. And it's like you're in there, and sometimes you're wearing gloves when you're in the garden or when you're working with plants, and sometimes you're not. Your hands just depends on how your hands are feeling, in my experience. And I would say the same is true if you're working in a big ag farm and their only thing that they're growing is corn, and they just or you're working on a wheat farm and they just sprayed glyphosate to be the desiccant, and they're wearing hazmat suits hopefully, but sometimes not when they're spraying it, and that's ironic if you ask me. But the claims are that the wheat then is processed enough that the glyphosate is not on there, and that's not what we see clinically. And we actually see studies that show glyphosate is incredibly destructive to our microbiome. So it's like, how do we reconcile between these like pretty destructive practices that are supposed to be good for us? And like, from a business perspective, I get it. Like, you want your wheat to dry all at the same time. Totally makes sense. But is there a better way that we can go about this? Because this is one of the arguments I've heard against regenerative agricultural practices. There's no way that we can feed the world's population with regenerative agriculture practices.
Yeah. Well, I have had just a couple of garden beds at my home and had more food than I could even eat between. I mean,
Totally.
it's my family. I feed myself and my husband. I don't have kids, but I mean, that alone, it was two raised beds. And I mean, I couldn't even process and eat everything that I had. So I had to, uh, I was giving things away, and this is kind of where like a society, societal things come in. If we spent all the time that we spend going to the grocery store and going to work and all the things that we do, if we
Yeah.
spent that time outside growing plants and harvesting and sharing plants, that we certainly could. It would take a massive shift in the way that we do things.
Yeah.
But I also think that maybe you can't feed the world with a bunch of boxes of cereal, but
I
you
mean,
could
not well.
probably,
Not well. Not
You know.
not for a good, like, supportive, strong human being. I mean, if it was the only
Right,
thing you had
right.
to eat, for sure. But
Yeah.
we've really moved away from like families having a garden bed or two.
Right.
I'm currently reading a book called Miraculous Abundance. It's about a couple of French farmers that started with a quarter acre of property. They now have more than that. But they talk about the amount of produce that they've been able to produce. And I think that they've also had animals as well. Enough to feed, enough to provide for themselves, their neighbors, and 2 restaurants that are pretty busy. A quarter acre.
Yeah.
So in my mind, if we can do things right and shift, like even if it's just you're not super into it, but you want to have a couple tomato plants, a couple zucchinis, maybe grow some onions and potatoes, like right there you have multiple meals, and then you have too many tomatoes, which always happens, or too many zucchinis, come on slow and then they go real fast, and you give them away. That's creating community and
Right.
connection
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
we have seriously lost.
Yes, for sure. And I'm a big proponent of, my background. I got my start in landscaping, ornamental landscapes, and then I kind of moved into, more food growing. But I'm all about perennial plants. So plants that you plant one time and then they come back year after year. So that's another step. If we can, if you're going to plant something in your yard anyway, you're going to plant a rhododendron or a hydrangea. How about we put in a serviceberry or a currant or a gooseberry or strawberries or herbs, chives. There are lots of perennial things that we can plant that come back year after year. And so I am personally, I'm all about fruit trees, all about the things that you plant once, and they do take some maintenance, they take some upfront work, but then they're coming back year after year, and that's just something that's always going to be there. If you plant raspberries, they're going to spread and go crazy in your yard, and you're going to have them for years and years. You can always go back, like, hey, it's raspberry harvest time. So how can we get some of these things for regenerative agriculture? It's also creating healthy soil. It's creating habitat. A lot of the chives, for example, they provide a lot of nectar for pollinators and honeybees. And
They make beautiful flowers.
yeah, beauty too. I mean, beauty is a yield. One of the main principles in permaculture is obtain a yield. And in my mind, especially because my background is in ornamental gardening, and I've experienced just the benefits of being outside and seeing beauty. That beauty is a yield, and seeing the beauty in, I mean, how beautiful is a strawberry when you go and you move and you move the foliage aside and there's a strawberry under there, and like that is a real connection. That's like a very human. It's just a basic thing that every human should have the chance to experience
Agreed.
on a regular basis. But I mean, it's amazing. You can get to be, you can live your whole life and not ever experience that, and that is not something, as humans, we've always done that. For however long humans have been in existence, we have been seeing food, identifying plants, growing food. Maybe in the last 100 years or so, we've removed ourselves from that. But there's a joy in that, and just to think that, like, it's so basic and it's so fundamental, and you can't really explain it, but when you feel it, you know it. You feel it.
100%.
Just reconnecting with that, the fact that we've deprived ourselves of that and we don't even realize it, it has a huge impact on our social systems, our mental health, our physical health, and the health of the earth.
Yeah.
So
When we're so far removed, it makes it hard for us to think about where our food comes from because we're already so taxed. In a two-family home, most parents are both working these days. Kids are being at school or watching by babysitter or nanny. Like, we've really gotten in this like point of where everybody needs to work way too hard, and like we're missing out on the little joys of like seeing that little purple flower from the chive grow. And surprisingly, in cold Colorado, they do come back every single year. It's pretty amazing. Like there are plants that we can use in our yard to make it be less work and more abundance. And I don't know, I'll tell you, buying raspberries from the grocery store compared to buying raspberries from the farm I get them in Hardkiss is a flavor profile not even comparable. Like it's like a burst of flavor in your mouth, and oh my God.
Yeah.
A little strawberry. And like I remember when I was in college, that was kind of my first introduction. Like we grew up having a little bit of gardens, but then we ended up living in an apartment. It made it a little bit harder to have. So when I was little, we had them, but as I got older, we kind of moved away. And in Gunnison, Colorado, where I went to college, there was an organization that got started, and there was a big community garden. That's what I got to be a part of, and I was like, wow, lettuce actually has flavor. I had no idea that lettuce tasted like something besides crunchy water or like weird wilty texture. And I was like, okay, there's flavor here. This is interesting. But there were kids in Gunnison. It's a pretty like outdoorsy area. Most people are pretty like tuned in that way, that thought carrots came from the grocery store. And so there was an organization that's still present and still goes on today in Gunnison that helps make sure kids know where food comes from. And it comes from the ground. And it comes from this seed that is oftentimes so tiny. And you're like, how could that seed turn into a carrot? How could that seed turn into a whole tomato plant, a whole whatever? Most people plant potatoes, not seeds of potatoes. But every once in a while you get those people. I have potato seeds, but it's so much easier to plant a potato than it is to actually do the seed thing.
Right. Yeah, and connection for kids is huge. And I don't know if you've heard of the nature deficit disorder. Just it's shown that when kids, and I think every human really, but
adults
specifically in kids, their ability to focus, their ability to problem solve, their attention spans everything increases for the better, just spending time outside. So one of the things I do a lot in designs is creating natural kids play spaces as well. So, and these can again often be less expensive. So it's using natural materials. So it can be things like chopped up logs, log slabs, that's a wood material, stumps that kids can jump on, boulders that they can climb through, tunnels that they can climb through, soft walkable ground covers, sensory gardens, lavender, things that attract pollinators, and get this, the stimulation of, or the calming, it's stimulation, but it's also calming, relaxing, and getting them connected to, the sensory, just the textures, the different textures, the smells, the colors, everything, and just helping to, when you get agitated, when you're looking at a screen too long, and you just, okay, I know that I can walk outside the door and go look at the leaves blowing in the wind for a few minutes, take a few deep breaths, and feel better.
Substantially. I often will say that walks are hugely underrated, and we live in like a suburban neighborhood, but we can get to a park and there's like trees and there's some shade and there's some grass, and our yard, we're new in the area, so our yard is in the works, but it's going to come along, to have that beautiful space that I can go sit on my porch and go look and smell and feel, and maybe a little reflexology garden. That was kind of what I was imagining when you were talking about kiddos. Like, take your shoes off, go walk on this thing. It kind of hurts so good, and take some breaths. Like, there's not much that going and sitting under a tree or going for a walk and looking at the natural environment can't solve. Like, yes, there are terrible things going on in the world, and there's only so much that we can do, and really over considering those things are challenging for us as humans.
Right.
But taking that 10-minute walk, even a 5 minutes, like some people are like, I don't have 10 minutes to take for a walk. Okay, great. Well, let's negotiate some other less time and see if that can be beneficial. And most people will end up taking a full 10, 20, 30 minutes even, because they feel so much better. And they come back, and their productivity, their ability to focus and get more things done in less time is much better than if they just sat at the computer screen for 8 hours. The amount of productivity goes down substantially. Companies like Google and Facebook and, like, you know, these big tech companies, they actually have like meditation rooms and healing gardens and like these natural creations that they've provided for their teams, because they understand that they increase productivity. A little bit of upfront investment for long-term success goes a long way. And not all companies have gotten on board with this, but some of the bigger ones are definitely like, how can we make things go better? Like, they think the whole 8 hours is the way to go. And you can definitely compress time if you're feeling less internal, like, tension. And we all know those kids. I know those kids. Like, I have 3 different weird chairs in my office because I got to sit on something else. Like, I got to be doing something different than just sitting like this, you know?
Yeah, having those tactile things to feel and to see and to touch and to experience. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, being outside, it reduces stress levels, it reduces anxiety. I mean, there have just been studies across the globe, Japan, you know, Scandinavian countries, the UK, United States, you know, that being outside increases immunity. You know, breathing in the natural chemicals that trees produce to ward off insects, harmful insects, are actually beneficial to humans with increasing a certain type of white blood cell, so it increases the immunity of people. So yeah, people are going to be less sick if they're spending time outside. You know, with their guts, you know, with the microbiome, with the immune system, and then yeah, mentally. And we all know that these things are all so very interconnected. You know, the health of, you know, the increased oxygen levels in the blood, vitamin D. It's all, I mean, there's so many connections and overall just health of the brain and
the green, the color schemes. Like, I can't remember the specific details of this one study, but it was like just seeing the variety of greens, shades of greens that are available to you when you're going out forest bathing. And I'm forgetting what the Japanese word is for it.
Yeah, I won't be able
That's
to
okay,
remember that
yeah.
either.
But forest bathing or earthing, or really, it's just all these like ridiculous words for it. Just go outside. Just go outside. Like, go look at the mountains. Like, we're really fortunate in Colorado. Most of us have a view of a mountain range somewhere. And that distance, this is an interesting thing too. We can see for as far as the eye can see in Colorado. Like, we're not shoved in a hole by a bunch of trees. So I'm just saying we got to see trees, but also that distance that we have to see for a vantage point is really calming to our nervous system.
Yeah.
It helps us to relax. And again, thinking about the screens, we're right here, look at the screen. And when we actually take a chance to let go and look further away, it relaxes our nervous system. And I'm going to forget what the specific like muscles in the eye, but one of them is stimulated by the sympathetic, the go, and the other one is stimulated by the parasympathetic, and it's the one that's looking far away, helps to relax the tension in our system. So you go for that hike, you go for that walk down to the park, and I'm not talking rocket science here. Like, we see the amount of stress and chronic illness be substantial in this country. And mental illness, I got some stats before we went. 22.8% of Americans in 21 experienced mental illness. That's almost 1 in 4. You know, a little more than 1 in 5 Americans. And that's mental illness across the board: anxiety, depression, suicidality, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, etc. That's a pretty stark number. Yeah. And I was surprised to see that there's like the Our World in Data. Have you seen this website at all? Really interesting place if you want to be a nerd about numbers. But I looked at worldwide expecting to see the United States to be one of the worst for mental health. And actually I was surprised that Peru and Brazil topped us substantially for people self-reporting mental health issues, for anxiety and depression specifically. I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. And I don't know culturally what's going on in those places. I just don't have a huge connection there. But I thought that was pretty fascinating to think about. So one of the things I remember learning, is when we were in my addictions class, we talked about what the opposite of addiction. Addiction is alcohol, drugs, pharmaceuticals, TV, sugar. Like we all have these different things that we kind of like, use as our vice. And I'm not against vices as long as you can continue doing your life and it's not negatively impacting the quality of your life to a degree. But like that's a fine line, and every person's going to be different, right? The opposite of addiction is connection. And when we don't have places we can go where we can connect with other people, where we can feel safe, where we can enjoy and like, oh, I've never seen this plant. You know what this plant is? I don't know you, but like maybe you know what this plant is. Right there, that creates a conversation starter for us to then potentially make a friendship.
Right.
And I feel like I've heard, this has been in my community, but also I've continued to be hearing this. Finding community is becoming more and more challenging, but we're more and more connected than we've ever been. So like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many directions I can go from here. But I know that there was very recently, I heard on Colorado Public Radio, there was a study done by CU for about community gardeners. So they did a study and they gave it was 300 people, so they gave half of them a community garden plot and the other half didn't get one. It increased not only their physical health, they were eating more fiber, they had more diversity in their diets, they were getting more physical exercise, being out and about, but also it really strengthened their social communities as well. And social, having a community is such a huge impact on our health. So, I mean, it can be something, no matter what you're gardening, whether it's a food and community garden, you're getting the benefits of that food, that's wonderful. But also it could even just be an ornamental garden, or I have a client in Boulder and she wanted to create in the front of the house. She lives in a neighborhood, Wonderland Hill. There's a lot of hikers that go there. In front of we did like a little bamboo fence, and then she wanted to we put strawberries and currants and gooseberries and edibles, and she put a little free library and a couple of boulders so that people that were walking by could walk through the garden and pick food. And then behind there was a pollinator garden and a native plant garden, so people could see that was benefiting the earth and the community as well. But I've had multiple people tell me, like, this inspires me, and I talk with other people here, and we stop and we get a book, and we pick currants and we learn about new plants, and so even just having a beautiful front garden. I mean, one of the best ways, if I'm in another country or if I'm traveling and I see someone outside in their garden, I'll compliment them on the garden, and it creates this real sense of pride and connection, and it does create these social communities. So,
and even if it's not yours, the people that are then walking past it are experiencing the beauty. It was one of my favorite things about living in Seattle, is like the gardens in Seattle are effortless.
Yeah.
Because there's so much moisture there. And so when I was there a couple summers ago, I just would walk around and I'm like, God, look at these plants, look at this. It just, it feels so good to my soul. And I feel like to most people's souls, if we let ourselves have that moment of like observing that beautiful flower that's growing, observing that bee that's taking a little slumber inside that flower, it's creating human community, but also plant and microbial and insect and bird. Like, it's creating a huge web of community.
Right.
It's bringing that back.
Yeah.
I don't really have a ton of bugs in my front yard.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of plant life.
Yeah.
So my husband and I have been having this like, well, do we put grass in? Because then at least there's something to like maintain the soil. So it's not just eroding away until we can get a better plan in. And I go back and forth with it, because it's like, would plant be better than no plant? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I can help you with that for sure.
Oh, definitely. We've talked about you. We've talked about you more than once.
Just some real simple cover crop type things. But, and another way that I feel like gardening and being outside, it creates a community, and like we're saying, social community and human communities. But also, we are part of nature, and that is what we are made of, natural elements, and we come from nature and we return to nature, and we are part of that. And I feel like gardening, being outside, connecting with nature really brings us home to what we are, where we are. It can give us a sense of purpose and a sense of place. And it can also increase our empathy and compassion for other beings. If you plant, okay, I'm going to plant this coneflower, it's going to be beautiful, and then the butterfly comes by and it's, enjoying the nectar, or you plant milkweed and the butterfly lays its eggs and they hatch, and you see these hummingbirds and bees and birds and butterflies. You have helped that creature live a better life. You've helped the earth. You have helped a community, because you are part of the earth. And the more we separate ourselves from the earth, the more that we feel like we're lost. We don't have our sense of place. So it creates a community of humans, but also with other species, and also just ties us back into the basis of what humans are, which is we are part of this amazing, beautiful ecosystem, planet, universe. And it's not separate. It's like a wave doesn't want to be part of the ocean, or a wave. Is it the ocean, or is it separate from the ocean? We can't separate ourselves from nature. We are nature.
We are.
And so connecting with that and understanding that and feeling that, I think really can give compassion and purpose to our lives.
Absolutely. And how many people feel purposeless. One of the things I've learned in the variety of various religions I've studied is, to me, one of my most foundational core values of being a human is being a steward of this earth. A steward of not only my human community, but also to ensure that the future generations are going to have plants and species and bugs and creatures. And I don't love bugs, but my husband studied a little bit of entomology when we were in college, and gave me a better appreciation for the creepy crawlies. And not all spiders are going to bite me and kill me. Those are just a couple. The rest can be maintained, and I don't like mosquitoes more than I don't like spiders. So, hey, I will take it. And going back to the community gardens, one of the problems, so I've got to be mindful of how I say this, because I don't want people to not be getting produce and vegetables from the grocery store. But when you have that fresh garden produce from your community garden, or maybe you threw a garden bed in your backyard or front yard, and you start cultivating and growing these things, you notice that there is a flavor difference when you pick that tomato from your garden and you go and eat that tomato right now, or you go and cut lettuce down. Like I said, it has flavor. And so many people don't like vegetables, and I think part of the reason people don't like vegetables is because it was harvested 3 weeks ago, and now who knows how long it's been sitting on the shelf, and it was picked unripe and chemically ripened with, in some cases, ethylene gas, which is a normal thing. That's how bananas turn brown. So bananas are a big way that we produce this gas. It's it becomes this whole long-winded thing. And so then we're having more pollution because we're harvesting something so it's apple season now, but if we want apples in June, in the Northern Hemisphere, where do they come from? Not North America. They're coming from South America and New Zealand. Oftentimes I see Chile and New Zealand as the label for apples in the middle of summer. Yeah, but I want to have my apples. Aren't apples good for me? Yes, apples are good for you. Grow an apple tree. Have a neighbor. I have a friend who's got a big orchard, and she's an older woman and doesn't harvest, and she doesn't, harvest for growing, and she invites the community over. There were 2 other people there. So there were 3 people harvesting from her orchard that she was then supporting. So it really becomes this giving back circular thing, and those hikers stopping at your person's garden that you helped put together, that is creating another level of connection. Kind of just it's beautiful.
Picking that off of picking the currant off of the shrub, or even trying a currant.
Exactly, even trying a currant, which so many people have never had.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that where the magic for me really happens is where people. I can give someone a plant that is beautiful. It provides food for pollinators. It can provide food for birds. It takes very little water, and it can provide human food too. Yep. So a serviceberry is a great example. That grows native to Colorado. And they're good. They taste good.
Yeah.
So you can go and harvest that and have a diversity, you know, and then connect with that plant and see that plant and yeah, get more diversity in your diet that way too.
Yeah.
So
More diversity, more nutrient dense food, which,
yes.
you know, one of the things that makes my job hard is like people are spending money on food that's high in calories but low in nutrients.
Yeah.
And so produce, fruits, vegetables, berries, you know, I'm an advocate of meats and beans. I'm an advocate of all the foods that are available to us that are like what great grandma would recognize as food type of a thing. And I'm not saying I'm against convenience foods, but there is a significant lack of nutrition in many of them.
Yeah.
That makes it, you know, yeah, it's a quick, you pop it in the microwave. I grew up eating banquet meals because they were cheap, and that was part of like my upbringing because that's what we could afford. And then as I got older and understood a little bit of like, maybe that's not the best choice, but if money comes down to it, fed is better than underfed. But it's like this, it becomes complicated. And I think part of the complication of our health has become from this loss of connection with the natural environment. Like food, someone said this, and I don't remember who said this, but I've heard it from a number of people now. Food provides not only nutrients, but also light energy. In order to make that tomato, in order to grow that serviceberry, the plant has to photosynthesize and turn that into nutrients that then can go and grow that berry so that we can eat it, or the birds can eat it, or it can fall to the soil and compost with the worms and the little creepy crawlies, right?
Yeah. And the more the soil is depleted and things are not put back into the soil and you're putting that chemical fertilizer on there, I mean, putting the compost into the soil that's got, you know, a million microbes and different chemicals and mineral compounds and all that kind of stuff is a lot different from just spraying nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium onto a plant to get it to grow. And,
those are three minerals, by the way.
Yes,
out of the many
millions
that we need. The
right.
periodic table, remember that. Like there's a lot of things going on there, not just three things.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I think anyone who ever, I mean, for me, I grew up in Georgia, and the tomato is like a homegrown tomato. They're a little harder to grow here. In Colorado, I actually, lettuce is one of my absolute favorite things to grow. Because I was like you. I was like, what? Lettuce tastes like something, you know.
It's
so,
bizarre.
but the tomato was and anyone who's ever had a tomato, I mean, fresh out of the garden, I mean, it's not even the same food.
Not even comparable. Like it's so disturbing.
Yeah, and they're bred to be shippable. You know, and the thing that makes the tomato delicious is all the little pockets of gel and, you know, acidic and
but that makes it more
and
susceptible to being damaged and smushed and, you know, that makes it hard to ship. Like the hothouse tomatoes are pretty stable. Like I've dropped some sometimes. They don't even really bruise.
Yeah.
Like they're just got like that really thick flesh. So like it's amazing that we can do this to cultivate because not everybody's going to have access to being able to grow a garden.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like you can have a pot of a plant and put, you know, like some rosemary, grow some rosemary in your garden, in your windowsill at home. Like hopefully you have a south-facing window that you can get some sun to nourish that plant so it can photosynthesize. And again, I know not everybody has access to that, but in an ideal world, maybe your neighbor does. And so you can then see their garden, and that is then creating a happy space. So really, like, if what you and I are doing for our own selves, it is benefiting not just us. That's like the beauty of this, is it's like, it's a ripple effect and it's constantly providing positive reinforcement and that inspiration. So maybe the next neighbor, instead of planting their lawn over here, they decide that they want to put a couple planters in because they've got a couple young kids. And get those kids, get their hands in the soil and like be working with it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the resources, I mean, a lot of people are like, I just don't have time for that.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to, it's just not something that I'm going to do. But, you know, maybe there's an opportunity of someone that does want to, you know, matching people with people that want to farm with land.
Exactly.
You know, is, you know, another thing to do, or allowing community garden spaces, that sort of thing. Yeah, or again, just keeping it simple where if the people with the resources that are going to For example, your neighbor that has the apple tree that people harvest. If we can get more people that do have the resources and that are going to landscape their yards to do some of these things, whether that's creating, a little community garden space that others can harvest from, even if it's simple things like raspberries that will grow on their own that don't need to be planted every year. Things like that, or if it's them, creating a native plant garden that supports local pollinating species and increases diversity. So the people that are going to be doing some of those things and that do have access to those resources, getting some of them to step up and be a part of that community in a way that maybe some people can't. If people have 3 jobs, maybe they don't, or 2 jobs, or even just 1 job.
Sometimes, yeah, that one job is a doozy for sure.
People that just don't have the ability at the time, but getting those people to step in and connect with the community is huge too.
Garden spaces. One of my favorite movies when I was a kid, and I know it's a book and I've never read it, is The Secret Garden. And I remember, these are kids. These are 10-year-old kids that are going into this garden and nurturing it. It's it's innate within us to nurture and care for and provide these spaces because we love them. It's we are part of nature, really coming back to that. And that's one of the things I really love about what I get to do is I say my job is really simple. And I'm simplifying it because it helps me remember why I'm doing what I'm doing clinically with my patients. Give the body what it needs. The body can be the earth. The body can be our physical body. Help the body take out the trash. So we had a bunch of little plastic chunks in our yard because they had dogs and they just ripped up things to shreds. So it's pick up the trash, pick up the trash, pick up the trash, and get out of the way. Because once the natural environment, including our body, has the tools, the resources, the nutrients, the minerals, it can do its job. We just have to allow it that space to give it what it needs. And it's pretty freaking amazing when, I planted echinacea at my last house, the coneflower you were mentioning, and it was one of the only plants that didn't die because my friend doesn't have she didn't grow up with gardens, and, so I was at her house and I'm seeing this echinacea growing and I'm like, it's growing and it hasn't been watered. It's impressive and it looks great and it was a beautiful flower and it put out multiple flowers, and so there's multiple bees that have enjoyed that, and it's right next to her little stoop that she sits on, and I love that.
So just creating these spaces and making it easier, working, again, going back to one of the first things we talked about, which is working with what works. So not trying to turn something into what it isn't, but respecting the value of what that earth or that space innately has. And creating these places where where people can gather outside and appreciate, useful spaces and being intentional with what we're doing. And, a lot of people, I've heard this a lot over my 23 years in landscaping, I don't ever want to have to do anything to my yard. I'm just going to put landscape fabric and rocks on that's what I want to do because I don't want to water it and I don't want to have to deal with it.
Inevitably, you're going to have to weed though, because that landscape fabric breaks down in the high UV content we have in Colorado.
That's right. And the land is, for one thing, it's valuable just from a money perspective. We pay a lot of money to have these yards, and then you want to just never look at it or do anything with it, put rocks in it. So creating these spaces, you can still create these low maintenance and financially, affordable spaces where people can gather and that just enrich our lives so much. You can use those native plants and those low water plants and create trees for shade and enjoy the space that that we work really hard to pay for, and to and create these spaces where people can gather and eat outside and just have that be part of our daily lives, and put the coneflower around where the when you see that butterfly on that coneflower, it's going to bring you joy. And yeah, again, back to benefiting everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, making use of these spaces that that are so valuable.
Yeah.
And keep it simple. Don't stress, don't worry about it so much. Maybe don't, I mean, if you live with an HOA, I can't tell you what you can do, but like, be like me. I just was like, I'm just not going to mow this. I'm just not going to mow this grass, and I'm okay if there's a couple weeds in it, and see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
I watered it less, yeah, I just kind of let it do its thing. Native grasses were growing up in there, so, yeah, so
Yeah.
it's been, yeah, it's a great experience to just enjoy, relax, instead of having to constantly change and control nature.
Yeah, the last place we lived at in Seattle, we put a lot of landscape fabric down, and Seattle's a tough place because it rains so much that is the degrading factor instead of the UV index. And we put some nasty thick landscape fabric down. It wasn't even a single year before we had massive amounts of weeds growing. So there's pros and cons to doing that. I am personally not an advocate. We will not be putting any landscape fabric down. I will put cardboard down, and if I need to put cardboard down every couple years, I'll do it. Because to me, that's in line with my values. And I know not everybody has these same values, but again, one little bit of shift creates a ripple effect of benefit for not only ourselves, but the thriving local native species. And that coneflower is also medicinal.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason I was wanting to grow it, so that after a few seasons I could harvest some of the root if I was feeling a little sick and didn't want to have to go pick up tea from the grocery store that was harvested who knows when.
Yeah.
So it goes back again to like being a little more self-sustaining and not anti-establishment, but sort of like we can be more self-reliant on ourselves. We just need to remember this is how humans lived before all of this industrialization. And there's pros and cons to it. I'm so happy to have running water and electricity. I don't want to live off grid. I don't want to live in a 400 square foot tiny house. Good for those people. I'm so glad for them. I am not one of those humans. I like my space. I like my different areas to create, and each person, you do you. That is definitely how it is. And
Yeah.
but this value of being a steward not only of our body but of the earth, I want my future children, my future family members to have a space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I'm blanking on what I was going to say, but sorry.
That's okay. Well, let's wrap up. If you guys have really enjoyed this talk with Paige and I, or my other content, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel. Working on so I can get a customized YouTube URL. Would really appreciate your support. You can follow me on Instagram at naturopathic_Dr. Shayna. That's my most active social media channel outside of YouTube. You can find me on Facebook as well. I accept friend requests from whomever, unless you pester me with weird things. There's a lot of weird people online. So if you're one of those people, I will block you. So sorry. Paige, where can we find you? Where can my community connect with you?
So my business is Online Landscape Designs, and I'm on Instagram at online.landscape.designs with an S. My website, onlinelandscapedesigns.com. You can book a free consultation with me there if you want to chat about anything. I am also on Facebook. I believe it's at Online Landscape Designs also. Yeah, so those are the best ways to contact me. And I just want to wrap up, and what I was going to say previously when I lost my train of thought was small steps. Any step in the right direction is a good step.
Yep.
If it's one coneflower, excellent. If you want to have a lawn and you go out there and you put a blanket on it and you enjoy that outdoor space and you want to have that, just be mindful of how large that space is and the resources that it's taking. But any step in the right direction towards getting outside more, creating more eco-friendly landscaping, native, water-wise, utilizing resources correctly, any step in that direction, bettering our mental health, physical health, is
Yeah.
a step in the right direction.
I like to say a penny's worth more than 0 pennies.
Mm-hmm.
And one step, that's kind of some of the stuff we were chatting about before we got recording, is the least, there are so many things we can do that have a great impact. We don't need 4 hours at the gym. 8 minutes is what new data shows. 8 to 10 minutes a day is where you can get the maximum amount of benefit. Like, we don't have to make things harder.
Yeah.
No one needs anything harder. We're just looking for more ease and grace and beauty, and who doesn't want any of those things?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.